This is the Sony ZV-E10. It's incredibly tiny and also very affordable, and I wanted to find out if you could get professional looking results when shooting real estate video. Let's take a look. First of all, we do have to talk about the size of this thing. It is so small, it literally fits in the palm of my hand. And when compared with my other camera, the Sony A7 III, it's a full frame camera, so the lenses do come much bigger. This is so much bigger and so much heavier. And although image quality is paramount when delivering work for clients, form factor is something I value, because when on a shoot for 1 or 2 hours and I'm shooting photos with this, having something lightweight I can carry around is something I do value very much. When it comes to image quality of this little camera, it is fitted with an APS-C sensor rather than full frame like the Sony A7 III. And this might put some people off, but you're still getting a decent sensor as it's fitted with the same one that's fitted in the hugely popular A6400 Sony camera, which I know a lot of real estate photographers that I've seen on YouTube have used for photo and video and got great results. So it's still a decent sensor fitted in there. It is 8-bit color rather than 10-bit, which a lot of the newer Sony cameras have, but for the price range, you really can't complain. It just means you're not going to be able to push it quite as far when color grading. When it comes to color profiles, this does come with S-Log color profiles, so if you're a bit more experienced, you can work with those flatter color profiles to draw back the highlights and work with the shadows more. Saying that, I wouldn't work with S-Log 3, as because it's 8-bit, those shadow areas can fall apart a bit more, so I'd just work with S-Log 2 probably. But if you're a little less experienced, then the standard color mode is still pretty decent on this. When we look at the frame rates on this little camera, that's something that could be a bit of a deal breaker for people, because it doesn't shoot 4K up to 50 or 60 frames per second, which is quite a sweet spot when shooting real estate to slow it down and get smooth footage. It does shoot 4K 30 frames per second, but that comes with a 1.2 crop, and when you add on the 1.5 crop of the APS-C sensor, a lens like this, the 11mm, becomes more like a 20mm lens. So that is something to consider when looking at this camera. I do actually shoot 30 frames per second quite a bit and just slow it all down to 25 frames per second on my timeline, and that actually gives me a nice easy workflow and just slow enough to work with to get smooth footage. One of the drawbacks you're going to want to consider is it doesn't come with a viewfinder, and the screen isn't very good on this. So when you are shooting, you are probably going to want to put your zebras on so you can get a good idea of when your highlights are blown out, so you can get a nicely exposed image. When it comes to price, as I mentioned at the start, this camera is very cheap and you can get it for about £500 or £600 now if you shop around. And because it's APS-C, you can get some very affordable lenses too. This is the Sony 11mm 1.8 and it's about £500. That means this whole setup here comes in at about £1,000, whereas this here, the Sony A7 III and the Sigma 14 to 24mm lens is about £2,500, so it's less than half the price. You can get newer cameras now which are body only, like the Sony a6700 or the Sony a7C II, for between £1,500 to £2,000, but that's just body only. You can get a whole setup here for about £1,000. You can also get great quality stills out of this camera, so if you really are on a budget and you want a camera that's going to do stills and photos, you can do both of this definitely. And here's some examples of photos I've shot, both flambient HDR and some single shot photos, and as you can see, they're absolutely fine. It's a 24 megapixel sensor, so you're going to get great quality images. The only drawback really is it's not got a viewfinder, and for me, I always want to look through a viewfinder when taking photos. In terms of usability, this camera is very user-friendly as it's actually marketed towards vloggers and content creators. So it's been stripped back quite a bit, so if you're new to using cameras, you should be able to find your way around it very easily indeed. Let's take a look at what this camera can do now. I'm going to show you some examples of the video I shot in standard color mode and also S-Log 2. And then I'm going to show you some examples I've shot with the Sony A7 III just to see if you can see much difference. So let's take a look, leave some comments below, let me know what you think. Well, what do you think? I think this camera holds up pretty well, to be honest. I mean, the dynamic range for the sensor is pretty good. I know today is a pretty gloomy day, so you're not really getting that contrast in the highlights, but the image quality is great. And well, could you see the difference between this and the Sony A7 III? it's pretty tight, to be honest, but I know if you compare it to full frame cameras like the FX3 and A7S III, obviously there's going to be a huge difference there. But for the price point of this, where you can get it for the whole setup for about £1,000, you really are getting a good deal. So I'd really recommend it for beginners and even professionals alike if you want a backup camera, as it's just great to have in your bag if something happens with your normal camera. This will do the job if need be. And when paired with a gimbal like the Zion Crane, you've got such a nice lightweight setup to work with. Another camera you might want to consider at this price point is the Osmo Pocket 3, because it shoots 4K 60 and 120 frames per second, and it has its own gimbal. So at this price point, it really is a great camera. I've also done a video of it, which you can find in the links below or at the end of this video. But again, thanks for watching, guys. Please leave any comments below and hit that subscribe button and the like button. And I'd also like to say thank you for Pettison and Prestwich for letting me film in this property. If you want to find it, you can find it on their website, pettison.co.uk.